Welcome to Chapter Chumps, a reading podcast where three guys read a book and then talk about it.
This is a new format. Oh, no, there it goes. Never mind.
Welcome to Chapter Chumps, a reading podcast where three guys read a book and then talk about it.
Well, one of us eats dinner.
Yep. I'm your host, Connor. I'm joined as ever by my two fabulous co-hosts, Connor and Josh. We're your chumps, here to talk some chapters. Today on the podcast, we will be discussing chapters 9 and 10 of Ursula K. Le Guin's The Left Hand of Darkness. And usually I'm not eating or chewing on the podcast. But today I am. I was running late,
As you usually do.
As I usually do. As I am wont to do, for sure. But get this. Okay. And it's kind of funny because this was mentioned on the podcast. We did an episode of the podcast when, my oven, I got this new oven and it was being installed, right?
Yeah.
I think that was, yeah. Yeah,
we did.
That was the one time we did it in the morning. Or
yes,
in the
that's
early,
right.
Yeah.
Mid-afternoon, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it was like 11. It was still morning.
Whatever. I mean.
Oh, you're right.
Time's all kind of fucked up for you anyways, right, Connor? But
Wibbly wobbly, timey-wimey.
At any rate, so anyways, I got this new oven. And so my wife came back and she was from work and she was like, oh, I'll make you dinner because I know you got to finish reading. I was like, hey, thanks. Great. So we were going to make baked mac and cheese. And on our old oven, the way that we would do that is you bake it in the oven for like 15, 18-ish minutes or whatever. And then the last couple minutes, we put it in the broiler underneath the oven because then it makes the top, there's like this breadcrumb layer on the top, very crispy, which is great. For like a baked mac and cheese, you want like a crispy top layer.
Oh, yeah. For it.
Well, this is the first time that we were using
that doesn't sound good to you?
I never really had it that way. To me, mac and cheese is like the box mac and cheese from like Kraft or the store brand.
All right.
So
Connor has nothing else to add. He just goes, all right. There's a lot unsaid in that, all right.
I know. I'm aware. I know that my dietary preferences are odd in some areas.
I mean, mine are too. Mine are too.
This is literally like a shift Thor conversation. Connor just goes, all right. There is some political maneuvering going on.
True.
I mean, I'm not gonna take food advice from the guy who hasn't had ketchup in 20 years.
I don't believe that.
Or ever had a hamburger.
True. That is true. The second one is true.
Both are true, at least. I don't know.
No way.
About
no way.
The ketchup
You've had
thing.
ketchup. Come on.
I forget the last time I had ketchup. It was definitely before I think it's been over 20 years.
I don't believe you. But that's...
No, it would have been less, because 20 years ago we would have been 10, which would have been 4th grade, so about how long we've known each other.
Well, he would have been 11, Josh.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
It's still like about 20 years ago.
He turned 30. You forget how old you are. You don't even know how old you are, do you?
I'm 31.
Yeah. Well,
if somebody were to ask me how old I am, I would say 28. Just like no question.
I do feel like I'm still in my late 20s. Yeah. Honestly.
There's no way, like, people do not come across the same tweets very often unless you happen to go on the shared account, which we do have. But I was going through Twitter not too long ago, and there was like this post where it was like, if you're in ages 25 to 32 and you haven't figured your life out yet or whatever, like, this is the time for you to do it. And I literally was like, 32, I just made the cutoff. And then I was like, wait. No, I'm beyond the arbitrary cutoff of this one fucking person on Twitter. Oh, shit. I forgot how old I was.
You're fucked.
I'm fucked.
Anyways, go ahead, mac and cheese.
This was all leading up to this. So this is the maiden voyage of the new broiler. And I was in the bedroom reading. My wife is in the kitchen. She's cooking. And I hear her scream. Like a real scream, not like a fucking, oh, we're in a relationship and whoa, like we're having fun. Like a shriek. A shriek. And so I immediately put my book down. I run into the kitchen and there's like smoke filling up the kitchen. And she's like, it was on fire. It was on fire. It was like I pulled it out of the broiler and it was literally on fire. And it wasn't on fire anymore by the time I came in, but it looked like it was on fire because the entire top was just completely fucking black.
Wow.
And so we open up like all the doors and the windows and we're like fanning the fucking smoke out. And so all that's to say is it took just a little bit longer than I anticipated. And the mac and cheese is burnt as fuck. It tastes fucking burnt. But I love my wife and it's pretty good. And that's kind of what I had going on tonight. So I wanted to share that on the pod.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good story.
It's I mean, it was burnt, but you know how they like the New Haven style pizza in Connecticut is it's like they got the burnt crust a little bit. So I was wondering if maybe that was maybe a new style that you've pioneered. That maybe you've accidentally stumbled upon something that could be popular.
Maybe. I could see that taking off because, you know, I live in the city and different neighborhoods kind of have to find ways to be trendy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, oh, we put our fucking ice cream in a Belgian waffle or whatever. Like all these fucking fuck ass food trends or whatever.
I was gonna use the word fuck ass for that.
Literally, yes, yeah, no. It's the fucking mental. It's the what is that in the fucking book we're reading? The
mind speech.
It's the mind speech, man.
It is.
We're mind speeching right now.
Yes.
Because it is fuck ass. It is. You know, it's all just different ways of trying to stay real. It's stupid.
Yeah, Connor, you're gonna put Queens back on the map, baby.
Yeah. Here we go. Represents. So, yeah. Anyways, we're going to be talking about this book.
Yeah.
Connor, I know that you also just finished reading these chapters a little while ago. You did not burn your food, presumably, but we were both reading not too long ago.
We were. Yep. Yeah, you called me. You called me, and you're like, "Hey, you haven't responded to any of these text messages. Are you gonna be ready for the podcast?"
Yeah.
And I was like, "Probably." And then you're like, "You're reading right now, aren't you?" And I was, and so were you, and we were just a few pages off from each other.
Yeah.
Cool.
Of course, my own saga kind of, you know, we fell out of sync with one another, but for a while there, it was good.
Yeah, and then after I finished reading around 6:45, and then I had a whole bunch of roast beef, and so I ate a bunch of roast beef, and now I'm very full. I'm recovering. I'm in roast beef recovery mode.
Yeah. The RBRM right now.
RBRM.
Yeah. Is that just like you got like a fucking bag of like sliced deli meat you get at Price Chopper or something, and you're just like out of the bag, just like slice after slice of roast beef? Is that?
I mean, here's the thing. It's a little bit. Beef. It's a little bit more involved than that.
Do you roll it up with a slice of cheese? Is that what's happening?
Okay, so that does sound delicious, and I have done that. But no. My new thing is preheated meals, or they're not. It's really they're meats that are in an airtight bag that you put in the microwave.
Yeah.
And 4 minutes, 3 or 4 minutes go by, you can you unseal it, and it's delicious. So I had like, well, I mean, essentially a TV dinner, but it's like you're not meant to just eat the meats. Like you're meant to like just make it part of a dinner, but I just eat the meats, and it's like 3 serving sizes of meat.
Wow.
Yeah.
flashed back to Kid Cuisine. Like,
Yeah,
it's all I could. When Josh said TV dinner, it's all I could think of. For some
those
reason.
brownies.
Yeah.
Those little brownies.
Uh-huh. Yep. I hope that little penguin is doing okay. They're probably all grown up now.
Yeah. Hard to say.
The climate is a little worse for wear. Like, I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's true.
He grew up to be the rookie in the Penguins of Madagascar.
I'm just glad he's doing all right. You know, it's kind of like keeping tabs on Macaulay Culkin. Like, I just want to know if they're okay, you know?
He does have face tattoos now, though.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you know.
That's an expression, you know.
It's an expression. Yeah. I'm not going to judge him for it. I mean, that's
no,
his
of course
life,
not.
you know? And he became famous at a really young age. Like, that does have an effect on people.
That does.
Penguins.
Yeah. No, that's that has a lasting effect, and you know, for better or for worse, usually for the worse. Yeah, he's not into like he's not like full Amanda Bynes yet, you know.
No.
He's doing okay.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, we recognize that the whole Amanda Bynes situation, that's not her like personal failure. I mean, that's
absolutely
it's the conditions of like her surroundings and the
100%.
The influences in her, like that's not her. That's not on her, you know.
No, it's everybody that she trusted failed her in her life as a kid, and yeah, I mean, I stand with Amanda Bynes.
And the penguin from Kid Cuisine.
Yeah. Yeah.
Pengy.
Pengy. You guys ever seen the show Pingu?
I have heard of it, yes. I think I may have seen half an episode when my cousin was into it.
It's a cartoon about a little penguin, and they speak like their own penguin language, and it's really good. It's really cute.
It was a meme for a little while.
It was.
Yeah.
I respect.
I missed
that
the meme until after I saw the show.
Yeah, I respect that it felt like it was kind of carrying the banner of claymation. Like Pingu and Wallace and Gromit is, I think, all we have really.
I think there's definitely some stop motion movies that have come out, but yeah, claymation specifically, I think would be Pingu and Wallace and Gromit as like the poster childs right now. Although there was a sequel to Chicken Run that just came out, I think.
Yeah, no, there was. Yeah.
So that is it's the same studio as Wallace and Gromit though, so not sure how much that counts, or if it was even claymation or just straight up animation.
Wasn't there a new Wallace and Gromit recently too?
Yeah, Murder Most Foul, which involved a penguin, by the way.
Yes.
Oh yes, yes, I've seen. Yeah.
I watched it about a month ago. It was really good.
Yeah, it did phenomenally well. It really it was like the most popular episode of television on the BBC for like 20 years or something. It was really popular.
Well, when Wallace and Gromit puts out something new, which it's like every 5 to 10 years, so it's an event.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the thing is, that penguin, that's kind of like the Macaulay Kieran, setup where it's like, Macaulay's alive, but like kind of shrouded in mystery. Who would have guessed that Kieran Culkin would be catapulted into the stardom that he is now? And
totally,
I think that's kind of the dynamic between Kid Cuisine Penguin and Wallace and Gromit Penguin. It's like,
yeah, and then Pingu's kind of in the middle.
Yeah, it's there's a spectrum to these things.
Yeah, there is.
So, that all makes sense, what we said.
Every word of it makes absolute sense. I do think that we do need, like, it's good that we're finally getting some more penguin representation in media. But I think we still have a ways to go to kind of make it equitable, because I mean, how many penguins do we see walking down the street? I see penguins every day of my life,
Yeah.
And they're just not represented in our media.
Connor, you said it. I only hope that day comes sooner than we think. Well, kind of on that topic of penguins in a weird way, in which they embody black and white, a stark contrast. we're gonna be talking about the Left Hand of Darkness, which itself marries or maybe even chemers. A lot of disparate parts here. You see where I'm going with this. This all makes just as much sense as the Penguin did.
No. That was a masterful segue.
Yeah, thank you. There is a quick book related question I wanted to bring up or maybe even clear up before we continue, because it's becoming more and more relevant. And so in this book, there's these two main kingdoms that we've sort of been seeing through the eyes of our protagonist, Genly I. And the first kingdom where we start off, we're like, okay, that's Karhide. Pretty, pretty clear, pretty cut and dry, Karhide. This second kingdom, we've had some different pronunciations, and I kind of felt like we had to land on an agreement, the three of us, before we go on. Because I don't want to keep saying something different, And do we have any thoughts on pronunciation or how you've been saying it in your head or to yourself?
I really haven't had a preference for it in my head, actually. I'm trying to... Did it come up in this second chapter here at all? Now that I'm thinking about it?
I mean, it's the pronunciation, no, but the name, yeah, I think. Oh, maybe not in the first chapter, actually.
Well, no, not the first chapter, but the second chapter was mostly Karhide and town names.
Whether it came up or not, because they're within the kingdom, I feel like because they're within the kingdom, we're going to be discussing it, and I would like to have a commonality.
To be pedantic, is it technically a kingdom?
No.
Anyways,
it's not.
You're
right.
I go with either Orgarin or Orgerin, I think. Which I don't have a strong preference between either.
Orgarin.
Okay, so I think I have like an Orgarian, like a yen sound at the end of it for some reason, but that's just probably me glossing over the actual letters.
Yes. I started off saying Orgorian, which I thought sounded cool.
It does sound cool, but it's just not. That's not
right.
Letters.
No, I don't think it is. That's the thing. That's what I said at first, and I was like, that sounds cool. But then Connor, I was hearing you, and I think that you're probably more right. And the thing is we've kind of settled on soft G's for Genly, and I don't know. I'm sure there's some other shit. And I guess I was thinking Orgerin?
Yeah. Orgerin for like an orgy,
Like an orgy, right? Because it all has to be tenuously tied to some kind of sexual act or link, right?
In this book, absolutely.
Genly, gender, estrogen, and then Orgerin, orgy.
Yeah, I think it makes total sense.
How do you spell it again?
Orgoreyn.
Yeah, I'm trying to see if there's any official pronunciations out there.
Josh, don't spoil yourself. It's a risky business Googling things on the internet.
Well, I'm just looking up the fucking pronunciation.
When will he learn?
I know.
But Josh,
when will he learn?
You've spoiled yourself in many innocuous situations just like this.
Yep.
That's exactly how you get spoiled. No one goes out looking for spoilers if they don't want to be spoiled.
Well, I'm not looking for spoilers. I'm looking for pronunciations.
That's literally exactly what I'm saying.
I think maybe deep down he actually does want to be spoiled.
I know. I think so too. Yeah. All right. Well, I'm happy to continue with Orgerin. Orgerin
sounds fine. I can't find it. Nothing is listing it out right, so.
Orgerin. You don't care. No one cares. All right, let's keep going.
Either of those feel right to me. So
I'm going to say Orgerin.
Yeah, that's fine.
Because I feel like the EY. Okay, whatever. Let's talk about these two chapters. We're truly about to get into it. Josh, if you figure out the ending of the book, please do not tell us. We're not there yet. We're only halfway through. So, just be careful. So anyways, today we're going to be discussing chapters 9 and 10 of The Left Hand of Darkness. Chapter 9, we've kind of mentioned this on the podcast before. Sometimes Ursula K. Le Guin will slip in these sort of like world-building fable chapters in this book. And it kind of has this tendency to alternate back and forth. We're reading these 2-chapter increments, and several times now we've gotten, world-building history, fable, myth chapter, and then like chapter that feels like it's further advancing the presence of the plot within the book.
Right.
And so, we are still within that pattern here. And chapter 9, Estraven the Traitor, seems like it would be about Estraven, the character we know and love from chapter 1. But no, it is not. This is a tale passed down through the history of the people of Gethin, and it covers, wouldn't you know it, 2 kingdoms that are feuding with one another because of a territory dispute that, they both share claims to this land, and so they are opposed. And the Prince of Esther is out on the frozen lake one day, and he falls through, and he gets out, and he's freezing, and he fearing for his life. He stumbles his way into this lone cabin, and hey, wouldn't you know it, there's the fucking prince of like the neighboring kingdom, nation, and they spend 2 nights of chemering together. After they heal one, one heals the other, and then they give themselves over to their passions, and they chemer, and then the people of the other kingdom show up, and they're like, hey, it's that fucking guy, except they don't even say anything, and they just kill him. And then I ultimately, in summation here, it kind of goes through this pattern where, hey, the child is born of the chemering, and then that child grows up in the kingdom of Esther, and then fateful circumstances occur in which like this pattern plays out yet again, where the child returns to the cabin, and that same person is there, their parents, their flesh parents, whatever they say. And it results in the peace of this feud is settled, with some wrinkles that we'll discuss. That's the best I can do for that chapter. Josh, would you like to start us off on just any thoughts or specifics in general? I don't know.
Well, I actually have taken a note on this chapter, because I was noticing something while I was reading, and I was just kind of putting things together. First of all, a second note that I had this morning, after I read the book, I was watching why are we cubes now? Or squares? Sorry.
Connor, you can't fuck around, because Josh will comment on it.
Yes, because I noticed this little shit like this. Sorry. Anyway, I found a new channel on YouTube this morning, and I was just listening to it, and it was like mapping out the locations of science fiction stories in the actual galaxy, and like what stars they actually are supposedly take place around. Stuff like Dune, Halo, Star Trek. And one of their videos, they started talking about another one of Ursula K. Le Guin's books, but he pronounced her last name as Guin. Yeah. So I went through like a good 5 minutes of like, what the fuck did he just say? Have we been saying it wrong this whole time? And then I remembered to look it up. I was working at the time, so I wasn't able to look it up immediately, but I managed to look it up after lunch. And yeah, it's Le Guin, according to Wikipedia. But it was very much like, oh shit, are we wrong?
Other people can be wrong.
Off, yeah.
We may assume ourselves wrong most of the time, but rest assured, other people can actually be wrong.
And they often are.
But it was the first time I heard that pronunciation, and I later realized I was watching more of their videos that they do mispronounce quite a few other words. So it wasn't an isolated incident. It was just a matter of, oh, that is very different from how I was expecting that name to be pronounced.
Did you comment and tell them they were wrong?
The video was over a year old, so no.
Not even just a screen cap of like "Run like the Wind Bart."
That is a great reference, but no.
Yeah.
So anyway, my actual note for this first chapter here is actually to do with the language of the names. So we're dealing with, you said kingdoms. I think they're more like, I was interpreted it more as clans, and like a clan dispute.
I think that's
so we had
that is technically true. Yeah.
Yeah, or hearth or whatever they call it. So we have the Estrade clan and the Stock clan, and whenever they were talking to each other, they were introducing themselves as Estraven and Stockven. So what I think happens is the Ven is like a maybe son, or it's a suffix that indicates that you were of a
Yeah, it's
hearth
like
or clan.
of. Or so, yeah.
Yeah. So let's see. Their names were, what was it, Eric and Therum?
Yeah.
My pen is starting to leak, so it came out kind of bad. So you end up with Therum Estraven, the kid that you mentioned. Sorry. And then obviously we've seen these names. Stop doing this, Connor. Fuck. And
I don't know what's happening. I'm sorry.
Stop pushing buttons. You don't have to push any buttons right now. Anyway.
Well, even if he pushes the buttons, I mean, you don't really need to comment on it, right? Like, he could push the button and you could just, like, keep going with your thought organically, like.
No. It's my fault. It's my fault.
No, I can't, because he does that, and it distracts me.
Yeah. And you know he's doing it to fuck with you, Josh.
Yes, I know.
You know that he knows you're gonna comment on it. Like, he's doing it to
All right.
fuck with you.
Okay. No, I am really done. I'm really done.
Audience, he's not done. Anyway, the reason this started to stand out to me this chapter is because we've seen a lot of these names before in Therum, Hearth, Rebir, Estravan, who we've just been calling Estravan this entire time.
Yeah.
So my initial thought when I was reading the earlier chapters was that Estraven was maybe a title or a last name. But after going back and like really looking at his full name in like chapter 2 or 1 or 2, whatever it was, I think it would roughly translate to Therum of the Hearth of the Estri clan.
Right.
So, yeah, no, it's just it was an interesting little exercise that I ended up doing on my own of trying to piece together the etymology of Gethin language, or rather, maybe not Gethin, but Karhide language.
Yeah. All of that stuff, like, in sequence is very interesting, and I do, like, speaking for myself, I just assumed that Estraven was his name. I thought that was his name. Mm-hmm. Everyone calls him Estraven. And then the chapter, Estraven the Traitor, chapter 9, ends where it's like, oh, and, you know, people are still called Therum to this day. And then chapter 10 immediately begins, and Estraven introduces himself as Therum. And I was like, right. And
it's also interesting because when I started reading the chapter title, Estraven the Traitor, I thought they were talking about the Estraven that we've been following through the book so far. We're halfway through the book now.
I mean, you are meant to think that.
Yes. Exactly.
And I think similarly, I think you are meant to assume that his name is Estraven. Not that you could not have figured that out beforehand, but it feels like the you know, for the way that the chapter 9 ends and chapter 10 begins, it seems like very clear that Guin is sort of like, okay, like, if you kind of haven't seen these pieces, here's me just effectively saying like this is Therum, really. And then like later in the chapter, because in chapter 10 I should say, because Genly keeps calling him Estraven. I think it's like Shuskus or someone who's kind of like, why the fuck we don't, that's a title, we don't use those here, his name is Therum. So yeah, it's I think ultimately kind of a minor detail, but Le Guin herself does kind of spend time within these chapters like unraveling it for you as you read, and it's like, I don't know, it feels like it matters. Like, yes, it's a small detail, but given the attention that she brings to it, and given the way that like chapter 9 ends, and that chapter 9 itself is kind of like this this like, you know, classical Gethenian, almost like morality tale or whatever, that is so closely tied to Estraven, and Estraven Therum in the present also being a traitor. Like, it feels important. It feels like there is a mirroring that she is kind of showing you, and it's like, huh? Like, it matters, right?
It's like a poem. It rhymes.
Yeah. there is a lot of rhyming going on here for sure.
Yeah,
there's other Star Wars stuff to talk about here tonight too, Josh.
Yep, it's just I had fun piecing together how the language worked a little bit, how the names worked, and seeing the pieces of not just like, oh, Therum and Estraven, but seeing how like Estria became Estraven. It's the kind of stuff that I was missing in Dune, and it's kind of tangentially related to what we were talking about with Dune Prophecy. Is like 10,000 years have passed between the setting of this show and the original Dune book, but the language has not changed at all. Like, even the names haven't evolved. They're like exactly the same. So it's nice to see a little bit of that going on in here, or even in Tolkien, Lord of the Rings. Like, you can see how stuff gets named as it goes on.
Yes.
And how names evolve or change, or just how like something gets called something else because it's a different group of people naming it or referring to it.
Yes.
So.
And I'd like to kind of add on that point, because this is bringing some stuff in from chapter 10 a little bit, but these chapters did make me consider the written language of the book itself again, which is very Tolkien, you know, esque. Not to sound like the fucking.
Is he really named Estraven, or is he really named Bobbert?
Yeah, not to be all pretentious and shit about it. It's Tolkien esque, but nah. Because, you know, the characters are commenting on the language that they're using, and now that they're in Ordrain, Therum, Estraven himself, or their self, is kind of like, oh yeah, fuck, I forgot I shouldn't be speaking in Karhiddish or whatever. And then when Genly is describing the whole process of how he got to the planet, and the shit, that whole like discrepancy between like the Orjorin word for firecracker and rocket.
Yeah, I like that bit too.
It's interesting that, you know, the characters kind of keep coming back to this, because if Tolkien were writing the book, he would have the characters. I think that there would be like a different written language to kind of denote that, and yet everything in Left Hand of Darkness is written in plain English, of course, because I don't I'm not sure if it's meant to be considered a translation, or if it's just, hey, this is the facts of someone writing a sci-fi story and whatever, you know?
Yeah.
But at any rate, even though as you're reading it, it's in uniform English, you're kind of like always reminded and meant to keep in mind that these characters are not speaking English, and that even when things, you know, are seemingly spelled out the same way, a lot of times characters are speaking different languages. And it makes me kind of wonder, like, how drastic is even the differences in these languages? It seems like Genly is more or less fluent in both, you know? I'm like, is it like a regional dialect, or is it literally like Genly just knows two different languages? And when did that happen? You know what I mean?
Well, he apparently had years to study on the way between where he started and when he got to Gethin. And he's been on Gethin for 2 years, so...
Yeah, he's been on Gethin for a while. There were also researchers sent before him to
right.
That maybe I'm sure he's thoroughly studied their work. But yeah, no, I mean, it is interesting because this really is like one of the first indications of that discrepancy in language that we've talked about a little bit, which I knew you guys would pick up on after I read it. But yeah, I don't know. It's I like, Josh, how you pointed out the evolution of language and naming conventions and stuff. That's definitely something that I thought about too. And I mean, I think that's kind of what these little myths or tales in between story chapters are for. I guess they really do kind of flesh out the history of the society, and I mean, in this case they do actually just give us genuine insight into one of the main characters clan's history.
Yeah.
Yes. Connor, as you were kind of like obviously going off a bit of what Josh was saying and stuff, did you have anything like you felt like you wanted to mention or kind of throw out there in regards to this chapter, or even I don't know. I'm always kind of find myself wondering, like, did you remember this shit? Like, are you reading through this and you're like, oh yeah, it's this chapter? You know what I mean?
No, I mean just vague. I mean, some scenes in certain chapters, yeah, but for this, not really. It's all just kind of like fuzzy memories for me. But I forget if we pointed this out, but this is about Karhide before it was unified.
Yeah, right.
It's two warring factions, and then eventually they unite, and that's the Karhide we know today in Genly's time. And I mean, it's just funny to like I don't know just how easily they Stockven and Estervin vowed Kemmering to each other.
Yes,
is interesting to me.
Yeah, that was a little a bit of a rushed romance, wasn't it?
Well, yes, but also it gives insight into like, well, is that why why war hasn't broken out yet? Because eventually, two pieces of these rival factions there will be a moment where they vow Kemmering to each other and back off a little bit. I mean, I don't know. I think it just kind of gives a better sense of their sensibilities and how Kemmering does just drastically change things.
Right. It's definitely a good insight on how, like you said, it drastically changes things. It just how it affects their relationships. It still felt like I can understand if they hit Kemmer like at roughly the same time, and like I could see how like a bit of passion going on there, how that could work. But the just immediately vowing Kemmering, basically effectively getting married in the analog of our society, after knowing each other for all of 2 days, a bit rushed, kind of Romeo. This might be the Gethin Romeo and Juliet.
Yeah. I agree, and I think that's why I feel like that's why it works, because you gotta keep in mind that this is not like a record of what occurred. This is like a story that's passed on through presumably thousands of years, even potentially at least centuries, right? And over time, like the edges get sanded off and things become more distilled, and it does definitely have that sense of like Romeo and Juliet kind of classical storytelling, and I think that's why I think that's why it works, because it feels so like true to a cultural tale that you continue to tell.
Yeah,
that's very true.
I also, during this chapter, I realized when I finished reading, it's like, oh, they were talking about hands in this chapter and how they like were mirrors of each other and all that. And I went and looked. It did not mention left or right this time.
It did not.
I did think enough to look this time.
Yeah, that is something I thought about too. It is still, I don't know. I don't want to quite say it's like puzzling, because I feel like that implies that there's like a singular answer that like the book will either eventually reveal, or if you think on it long enough, you will like come to find. And yet, I get the sense that is probably not true. I think that Le Guin seems to be much more abstract in like her metaphor or her analogy, or however you want to put it, I suppose, where we kind of keep talking about how there's these rhymes, these repetitions throughout the history of Winter and within the story as we're reading it. And I think obviously the whole hand motif is important, and it's part of that. I guess I just feel like as we come across it this second time here, I was sort of coming away with this feeling of like, okay, it matters, but I don't think that it's like a definite one-to-one analogous sort of thing. I think it's meant to point something. I think it's meant to like evoke something. But it's not like when you're reading Lord of the Rings and you're like, oh yeah, so the ring is a fucking substitute for power. Got it. It's like I don't know what the deal is with the hands, but it's kind of this sense of like duality and commonality that like that is shared.
I think that's exactly it. At least in this chapter. What is the left hand but not like half of the half of a person, it's like and I think that's I mean, Carhide, Orgerin, unification, I think it's all there, but I do think it is kind of layered in a way that is more abstract than a writer like Tolkien, for sure. But that was his thing, was really, I mean, it wasn't anti-abstraction. It was very much like classical tale, I guess. Whereas it's funny because in this chapter specifically is like, it could be ripped from a book like Lord of the Rings from Gethin, but in a bigger whole of a book that is doing a totally different thing. Like this is a little bit of history, whereas Lord of the Rings is like the full history book, I guess.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, I think it does. And it's like, I have an imagined nerd, on my shoulder who's like, well, Lord of the Rings isn't the full history, but like I completely get your point where essentially Lord of the Rings itself is presented as the story that and yet, I think it's kind of like if, Lord of the Rings would be the equivalent of if Left-Handed Darkness was only these like collection of tales, and it was presented as like a continuous, like,
exactly,
story given to you from the culture.
Yeah.
And yet we kind of have this like we have a very different perspective on matters here in Left-Handed Darkness. It's not a history book. It's
absolutely,
it's an amalgamation of things.
Yeah, and I mean, it's interesting because we're getting a mixture of records from the Alien, whereas we do still have a very very alien perspective of this planet and its peoples, and we're getting that kind of juxtaposed with like myths, like stories that the people of this land would be telling the aliens. So it's still, yeah, it's we're still removed from it, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a very interesting balance and a very interesting way of like telling the story. And Le Guin's like very upfront about that. As you read like the foreword, she's like, "Oh man, what is truth?" and this and that. And then like you read the opening of the first chapter of the book, and Genly's like, "Man, this story's fucking crazy. You're gonna get like 40 different perspectives on it, and then you figure it out." And like the book feels that way. Like the more you read it, like honestly, it felt like for like the first 5-6 chapters, we were kind of saying like, what even is the plot? Like what is like the narrative thrust of this story? Like it feels like a whole bunch of like anecdotes and disparate story parts kind of smashed together, and yet they're related, and there's like this clarity that comes on you. It feels like here we are halfway through the book, and I do think that like this part of the story has crystallized a lot more for me, and I think it's kind of a fascinating way of writing, because you're keeping all these things in your head as you're going, and it feels like there must be some kind of glue holding it together, and at some point it kind of coalesces, and suddenly Josh is like, "Hey, Estraven," then being a suffix meaning of, hearth is the, it's like you're making connections that you didn't even. It's like a sleeper agent. You're like, "Oh fuck, wait a minute, all this shit that I thought was meaningless, or I not meaningless, but like yes,
you're on a good path, but it may also just be undiagnosed autism."
Well, Josh, I have some bad news about yourself. There's the left hand and the right hand. You know what I'm saying? Like I think we're all on the same hearth right now.
Oh yeah, no, I'm well aware of that. That's why I said undiagnosed.
But yeah, so that's kind of where we're at. Man, I do have a few more things to mention about this chapter, but I don't want to just prattle away.
No, go for it.
Okay, I'm gonna prattle that. Really, so Josh, you were talking about it's like poetry, it rhymes. And I took a few notes of things that I felt like were reoccurring, given like the story in chapter 9, this little short story. And I was like, oh, it's like so many things in this book seem to be cyclical. We've already talked about the Hamish cycle. Mm-hmm. We don't fully know what that is, but there is some very small...
There's some crumbs that kind of piece things together in the next chapter. We'll get into that after our...
Yes, we will. You're
after
right.
This one.
I don't want to get off on an undiagnosed autistic tangent, but it's like, yes, that's all there.
Keep that until we get to Star Wars.
That's right. Hopefully I'll be diagnosed by then, because if not... But yeah, it's like, okay, the Hamish cycle, and then like, yeah, the whole hand thing, Estraven, the name itself, and...
I just gotta say Hamish cycle. Hamish.
I keep saying Hamish, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's an end sound.
All right, thank you, Hamish cycle. And then the other thing that I thought was interesting is that, so in this chapter 9, the two, not kingdoms but hearths or whatever it is, the feud is because of this this disputed territory between them. And that obviously mirrors what we're seeing between Karhide and Ordrain. And so I thought it was very intriguing that the chapter ends with like a resolution. It's like, oh, well, it was a feud of land, so like it was not going to be easily, figured out. And yet the way that it's overcome is through Kemmering, is through these two opposed parties finding like love and commonality with one another. And at first I was like, oh, well, you know, could it just be that on the face of it, this is a mirror for how the story is going to conclude? And like, you know, maybe, oh, it's like poetry, right. But I don't know. I kind of feel like the way things have been going, I think there'll be like a setup that's similar, and then there'll be sort of like a twist of fate or something unforeseen, or because just like with Estraven, I don't know. I don't want to get all twisted around, but it feels like already it was because in this story itself. Okay, here's why. Let me lay this out there, and then I'll shut up, and you guys can say whatever. But it was because in this story itself, we have a cyclical event that then defies the setup, and we get that in the sense of the Prince of Esther and the Prince of Stock or whatever meeting in the cabin, and they're Kemmer and all that, right? It's like they put their hands up to one another. And of course, you know, the Esther, he's killed. And so even that is repeated when the child returns. And, you know, we get the same, he's on the lake. There's the wounds on the neck, and it's like, it's the same. It's the same. Yep. You're meant to realize it's the same. They put their hands up together, parent and child, same hands. It's like, oh, it's a perfect fit. It's a perfect match. But of course, thankfully, I shouldn't say of course, right? There has been incest.
I was worried for a second.
Yes. So thankfully, it doesn't go the exact same way. There's a mirroring up to a point, and then there's a diversion. And it's an important splitting of the story that's set up the same way. And so I was like, well, given all the repetition and the commonalities between this tale and what's happening within the like contemporary plot of the book, would it not follow that the setup is meant to lead us to a point that feels like it's going to continue down the same path, and yet I think the story is telegraphing that there must be some kind of diversion, or else you will only ever be caught in a cycle. If there is no diversion, then the cycle has to continue. It will repeat for infinite, ad infinitum or whatever. And so I think there's kind of this idea of like a cycle, you know, there are important pieces of like it reoccurring, and yet like there has to be a schism somewhere, or else it's perfect stagnation. And so I think where this book will end up is leading us to a place where you go, oh yeah, this shit was foreshadowed. But then Le Guin's going to be like, yeah, but you didn't see this coming. And I don't know what that is, because that's the nature of it.
And if that doesn't happen, you're excited about that now, but you're going to be disappointed when it actually happens.
Josh, you just might be right. I don't know.
But that's why this place isn't like Dune, because the cycles break and they proceed into the next epoch. Yeah, I mean it's just a shame that Estraven already vowed Kemmering to somebody, so he couldn't elope with King Argivan.
That's true.
You know,
but I still think there's an Estraven Genly love story waiting to happen within this book.
We'll see. We will see.
And I'll tell you why. Oh my god. Okay, it's because
okay.
So the previous where was it? Wait a minute. Okay. There's this line at the beginning of chapter 10. I'm sorry, I'm talking about chapter 10. But there's this line about the beginning of chapter 10 where Genly, like, you know, the first page, Therum shows up. He's like, it's Therum. Genly's like, oh, fuck, this fucking guy. And
it's Therum time.
And there's a line where Genly kind of remarks or comments like, there's no truce between them. There's no peace between them. And I was like, yeah, but isn't that the exact situation that Stock and Esther found themselves in the chapter I just finished reading? It felt like because they're so opposed on the face of it, I was like, this is a fucking will they, won't they? This is just some fucking TikTok romantasy slop for the modern age.
Shifter 4.
Yeah. You know?
Well, hey, I think that's a good enough segue to you can transition into chapter 10, maybe.
I'm ready if you guys are.
Yeah, let's do it.
Sure.
Did you want to take a break, or do you want to keep going?
I can keep going.
All right. You
Uh,
good? Maybe a two.
If you want to take a break,
let's take a quick 3,
right.
and we'll regroup.
Tight three, and be right.
All
back.
right. Uh-oh. Am I live? I certainly hope not, because my co-hosts aren't here. We'll have to wait and see if the actual live stream catches up, but the little icon at the top says we're live. So, hi everybody. I know you're not actually listening. We're going to start talking about Chapter 10 here in a moment. And, yeah, there's not much that I can say. I've just been reading a Discord chat that has nothing to do with our podcast while I've been waiting for the other Connors to get back. So, yeah. Did you know there's a lunar eclipse tonight? Oh yeah, look at that. I'm definitely live. Unfortunately, where I am, it's going to be cloudy, so I'm actually currently looking out my window watching the full moon get obscured by clouds, and knowing that there's no way I can possibly get up at 3 in the morning during the peak eclipse to actually see it because it's going to be cloudy, because that's how weather goes in my area. Hey, there's my co-host. How's it going, Connor?
Good. I'm going to be working overnight tonight in New Haven. I don't know if I'll be able to see anything, but I'm going to go outside and look.
Well, yeah, give it a shot. I think the eclipse starts at about 11:30, like starts, but it's a lunar eclipse, so it takes a while, and you may not notice anything until it's a full eclipse, and that'll be closer to like 2 or 3 in the morning.
All right, yeah, I'm going to be on the lookout.
And I think it ends at like 6 a.m., so it's like by the time I wake up, it's going to be practically over.
Yeah. You're not going to give it a shot?
Not with the weather report, no. I actually checked it right before, or right at the beginning of the podcast, and the cloud cover basically just went straight up from like now up till midnight and didn't come back down until morning. It's like great. But I got to see a solar eclipse last April, so I'm not terribly torn up about it.
Yeah.
It's hard to believe that was a year ago.
Fucking hell, Harry.
All right, guys, ready?
Yes.
Pretty much.
All right. 3.
Crazy.
Your hair looks great.
Okay.
3, 2, 1, action.
All right. So we're going to talk about Chapter 10, which... What was it called? Doesn't really matter that much. Conversations in Missionary. Wow, it really doesn't matter at all. That's a very important title. So yeah, but that does kind of embody what the chapter's about. We have the aforementioned conversation between Therum, i.e. Estraven, and Genly. And then, like, Genly is sort of, like, settling into the city of Missionary in the nation of Ordrain. Collective? I don't know. It doesn't matter. It does matter, but you know what I mean. And, like, really the meat of this chapter is Genly kind of rubbing elbows with the bigwigs, with the common souls, with the secret police, with the spies from Carhide. You know, it feels very much, as I'm kind of laying it out there, we were talking about Dune, feels a little bit like the dinner party, the notorious dinner party chapter in the first Dune book, where the chapter itself, like, is effectively a very long conversation, and yet, like, because of the coming together of, like, all these different parties and political players, there's a lot of, like, underlying tension and a lot of, you know, essentially trying to, like, talk around each other, and everyone's kind of playing their own game. So it is very intriguing from that regard. We learn a lot, especially from what Genly shares with the Ecumen. and yeah, kind of fascinating to see everyone's like reactions as Genly goes through his whole spiel, and that sort of brings us to like a close of the chapter where eventually the dinner party has run its course. Genly leaves with Shuskus back to his place, and they kind of have another conversation about Estraven Therum, where yeah, he's very much kind of an unknown, um, and it seems like from the perspective of like Orgerin, like kind of written off, I think, and underestimated. And yet I think the impression, like as a reader, is that it's Estraven who's kind of pulling all these strings, and yet he's not. It's done so under the radar, and in such a way that he's completely unassuming. People are pretty much just making fun of him either to his face or behind his back, and yet it feels like he really is the one who's in control, if you ask me. At least given the past 3 or so chapters we've read. So yeah, the dinner party.
Oh, sorry.
Nope, that's it. I'm sorry, Josh. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I don't really feel like Estraven's. I agree he's pulling strings behind the scenes very subtly, but I don't think he's in control. I think he's trying to rebuild himself still. I think he's just maneuvering, not necessarily in control.
Yeah,
I think there's I think there's a small difference there, and I just wanted to clarify it.
Yeah, I think you are probably right, because I don't think Estraven would feel confident that he has a grasp on things either. But I think he's still trying to push things in a way where it's like, let's not have all-out war on Gethin, right?
Yeah, I mean, he is definitely trying to push things in the direction he wants them to go, but at the same time, he is kind of being used as a pawn or a tool in their in Ordrain's agenda. And yeah, I mean, I would want to talk a little bit about the first scene in this chapter where Estraven meets up with Genly briefly, where Genly gives him the money that Ash gave him, and it talks a little bit about not to trust the people that he's going to be bumping elbows with later that day, or just to be aware of their agendas. And pretty much this interaction ruins Genly's whole mood. He's like, this fucking guy, just get the fuck away from me. But I mean, Estraven leaves without kind of expanding on things, and kind of leaves Genly hanging a little bit. I don't know. It's an interesting chapter just because it leaves you wondering, well, what does Estraven want from Genly at this point? What is his end game as of right now? We know obviously he is a traitor to Karhide, even acknowledges himself as so. But for the right reasons, I guess. Where is he going from here? What is his MO? And so I don't know. There's more to be discovered, I think.
Yeah. Do you want to weigh in on that, Josh, or?
I don't know how much I can add, honestly. I really have no idea what Estraven's really up to, aside from what I mentioned a moment ago. I just think he's maneuvering. To what ends, I really can't say at this point. I just haven't picked up on enough context clues.
See, that's interesting, because my take on Estraven at this point in the story is I think that he's completely honest and forthright. And like, yeah, he kind of speaks like vaguely or whatever, and Genly's always like, what the fuck are you talking about? But I think that Estraven's thing is that, like, at least when he's talking with Genly, I think Estraven is like always completely honest, and that's like the thing, because everyone's always like, what's his game? And I kind of feel like the trick is that like he doesn't. I think Estraven's plan literally is what he laid out in the first chapter, and he does not want war to break out between Karhide and Ordrain over the Synoth Valley dispute, and he feels that the only way for the dispute to not lead to war is for Genly to be accepted as the Ecumen envoy, and for like this greater society beyond the stars to, if not unite the disparate nations of Karhide because of like the existential coming of a superior race, then at the very least divert attention so far away from it that the momentum of war subsides. And I think that Estraven is trying to use Genly to that end.
Okay.
That's my thought on it.
Yeah, that is a very good point. I honestly thought his goals may have shifted somewhat since his exiling, but that is a very good. You point out a really. Sorry, my language just left me again. You make a very good point about how that is still most likely his ultimate goal that he is working towards, and honestly, it feels like just kind of the expectation as the reader that you'd want the good ending to happen, or that you'd want the good outcome to come about. And so I wasn't really chalking that up to Estraven's goals, because he's just so shifty about everything with all the Shiftworth stuff. He even his counterparts in Ordrain. They're so much more straightforward with Genly, and it's still weird to see Estraven just being extremely cagey and not speaking plainly at any given point. And I'm wondering if there has to be a point where he does break down and finally just speak plainly to anybody, let alone Genly. So it is kind of hard to tell what he wants, and I think that's his fault. It's hard for me to tell if he's trying to be cagey or if he's just cagey by nature and is genuinely trying to reach out and communicate with other people, but his Shiftgrafor and all his, like, the way he thinks just prevents him from doing that.
Yeah.
So that's something I've been trying to figure out with when I've been reading. It's like, is he trying to be cagey? Is he just completely awkward and has no idea how to communicate with other people outside of Karhide-ish, the Karhide court? I can't tell yet, and it's going to take more reading to figure that out.
Yeah. Obviously we will see, but I do feel like it's more than just like cultural awkwardism. I think that Estraven is smart enough to realize that what he wants, if this is what he wants to accomplish, of course, if that is his goal, then I think he's smart enough to know that there's a lot of enemies and a lot of targets on his back, because, you know, to avoid war and to like dissolve the dispute is to relinquish a lot of power. And, you know, as we'll discuss, the Commensals of Ordrain pretty obviously want to accept the Ecumen offer first, because they're like, well, that's the fastest route to us kind of being back on top. Like, let's welcome the aliens, you know? And so I think that Estraven has to kind of play this game and like say everything in this like foggy half-truth kind of manner, because if he did speak plainly, he would probably be dead. Tybe already tried to assassinate him. And so
Yeah.
I think that it is essentially a defense mechanism, because I think that he's trying to like dissolve the barriers that give those around him power.
He's extraordinarily politically savvy, and I think it's confusing for Genly, because Genly, he's just beginning to pick up on all of these conventions, and so the way Estervin is circumnavigating them is bewildering to him, I think. So I mean, I don't know. I think Esther is a very interesting character in that regard, because he can he can keep you guessing or leave you unsure of his of his position or intent. But I feel like both of you guys have made some interesting points, and I don't know, we'll see.
I kind of want to jump off of what you were mentioning there about how maybe some of the confusion is literally just that Genly doesn't have a framework of like political maneuvering, and as he goes through his conversation about what the Ecumen is and how that both relates to and differs from like Orgerin, for example, because he's talking with the Commensals, effectively the leading body of Orgerin. It becomes clear that I guess Genly is kind of fascinated in like a nerdy way, where he's like, oh, it's just like the textbook, you know what I mean? Like
it's like a real bureaucracy to him. He's like,
yes.
Oh my gosh, yeah. And Karhide obviously is it's more an ancient form of governance. So
right, and
that is all fascinating to him.
So I do think it kind of leads to Genly being like, what is up with Estervin in particular, because Estervin's operating on a level of like necessity and like political savvy that not only is not like required in Ecumen, it just literally doesn't exist. And we talked about, like, in the first chapter, that was kind of a big deal, where Estervin kind of embodies like a personal power given his position in the Karhidish ruling body. Obviously, that's changed for him, but there kind of is still like the same misunderstanding, where Genly keeps kind of going like, what is Estervin's deal? Is he stupid or something? And yet Genly doesn't seem to be like realizing or considering, maybe Estervin is just like beyond what I am considering.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
maybe I'm the stupid one here.
Right, because like Genly is so outside of this framework, and yet he's our POV character. I think that's where some of our confusion comes from too.
Totally. Mm-hmm. That's absolutely exactly what's going on. I mean, to him, it's the same way when he explains what the Ecumen is at the dinner. They're so befuddled by the structure, by the organizational structure of it all, that it's just it's like incomprehensible.
Can you tap on your mic a little, or I don't know,
your
if
mic's
it's a little
fucked
up, man, but
is that better now? Can you hear me?
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you. I wasn't sure if that was my connection or not.
No, Connor's mic.
No, when in doubt, it's me.
Why don't we talk about what Genly says about the Ecumen? Because that's probably some of the most out there kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And we finally have some confirmation about some questions we've had throughout the book so far.
Exactly.
Like the fact that Terra is Earth.
Yes.
We just get that straight out, which I was surprised. I thought it would just continue to be ambiguous for the rest of the book. So, cool. And then we get some. Apparently, the Hainish are just people from Hain, the system Hain. So maybe they are there's some indication that Terra is not the homeworld of humanity, which is a little weird, but not unheard of in sci-fi. So I don't know. The missing links were a bigger thing back in the 60s. I feel like evolutionary biology or archaeology has kind of closed the gap quite a bit on human origin here since this book was written, but it's still an intriguing prospect for a fiction book.
It is. And yeah, I mean, like, it really does. It's so funny, the sequence in which we read books, because it always feels like a Boss Baby take to say, like, this is like the last book we read. But this really is like 2001. Because I agree with you, Josh. I think the implication is that just like how we were reading in the previous set of chapters 7 and 8, there's this idea where it's like, hey, maybe the people that exist and evolved on Gethin were a bio experiment or whatever, and it, blah blah blah. I think effectively what Genly is saying here is that Earth might be that too, to the Hainish. That effectively it's just one of many worlds in which the Hainish just like had a subset of their species just evolve and grow on this planet. And that's not said outright, but I do think, like, given how it's laid out there, that's kind of like floating there. That Earth is not just Earth as we consider it. Yeah.
Yep. It's strange, but it's out there in the book. And there's another point I wanted to make, but I just lost it. Sorry.
About the Hainish?
Maybe where is this in the book? Sorry, just so I can. It's been a couple days since I read.
You should be looking at page 146, maybe something like that.
Okay. I'm just looking because he mentioned there was another culture that came with the Hain.
Yes, and maybe so. I have this note. I don't know if this is the same, but page 147. Genly is like, how could I explain the age of the enemy?
I was just looking at that.
Yes, to a culture that doesn't, in which war has never occurred.
To people who had no word for war.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, this whole conversation was just fascinating from a communication standpoint, and they don't have words for some of the things that Genly takes for granted. The most humorous being rocket ship, but one of the more poignant is war. And it makes you evaluate, like, how does cultural thinking affect your language, even. Like, I was thinking earlier in this podcast, I didn't really bring it up, but, like, yeah, rocket ship and firecracker are a funny thing, but, like, what if a culture didn't really have sailing? What would they call a space? They wouldn't call it a ship or a spaceship, because that implies a naval tradition that you see preeminently throughout sci-fi. I mean, just look at Star Trek. Everything is based off of naval tradition. Or Halo, Star Wars. It's all some form of... Star Wars maybe goes a bit more Air Force, but again... that Air Force is derived from naval tradition and that sort of the way they call them airships. And
it's literally all informed by our past and history, and if we don't share that, then what do we end up with? But it's the Hainish and the Satians or Satians.
Satians, right? Thank you. What page is that?
I actually think our numbers are different.
No, come on.
We literally have the same copy of book.
I thought we did. Maybe mine's different.
No, it's not. You're looking at. We're talking about two different pages. What's your page?
Mine's at 136.
136.
Yeah.
That's chapter 9 for us.
Wait a minute.
Connor, hold up your book. You had it like half in frame a second ago. No, Connor McElvin. That's a wider book.
Oh.
You guys got little boys.
What the
We're
fuck?
using the books you gave us.
So wait a minute. Oh, okay. So you bought us the cheap ass fucking version? Is that what happened?
No, I think this is a cheaper version then.
That's a library book.
No,
Right?
this isn't a live. No, it's not. No,
Oh, you
no.
did? You actually bought it? Okay.
I bought it. Yeah. This is my my bookmark is my FedEx employee ID.
Okay, but you didn't get your book when you got us our books. You got us our books thinking you were getting the same version you had.
Yes,
Is that
exactly. Exactly.
Ah,
Okay.
okay.
So we have not had the same. So once again, we have not had the same fucking book.
You know, we could have figured this out episode 1 if Connor just actually looked at the page numbers when we referenced
What is
them.
it? What does
Yep.
it matter though? Who gives
We
a
were so
shit?
excited in the first episode. It's like we could finally reference the page numbers, and we've been referencing the page numbers.
Yeah, I
Wow.
don't care.
No,
About the
exactly.
page numbers.
That's why we're finding this out now, Connor. Because you don't care, and because every time we reference a page number, you don't even look. And it turns out this whole time, we still haven't had the same version, the three of us. It still hasn't happened yet.
What does it all matter? What does it really matter though?
It doesn't matter. It was just kind of...
It was
You
kind
know,
of cool. It was kind
Yeah,
of
you know, it's like...
Yeah, it was
oh,
kind of cool. It would allow for like quicker searching through the book.
Well, I'm sorry
occasion,
for
but-
breaking, I'm sorry for breaking the illusion. So earlier today, when Connor, you said that you were on page 136 and I was on 132 or something.
yeah.
I
You were
guess I
probably
was
way
actually,
further
I was
ahead.
actually farther ahead. I was actually farther ahead of you.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, because you said you finished reading at 6:45. I was like, fuck.
Yeah.
Damn, dude.
Yeah.
Read fast.
All right. Sorry for
So-
breaking the illusion, guys.
So the page numbers do matter a little bit in a dumb way. So, yeah, I mean, they don't really matter. Where was this? Oh, right. We were talking about the Hainish, the whatever the other fucking things are. The Age of the Enemy.
Yep, cetaceans. No, that's dolphins.
Satians.
Satians. Thank you.
What
And then also about, I mean, there is a whole conversation. I don't want to. We can talk about it all, but about, how long would it take Genly to radio his people to pick him up?
Oh,
And
yeah.
there's a few different options there. He has something
There's like a
called the
dozen
Ansible with him that he could
Yeah, we've seen the Ansible, but he also
Yeah.
has just a regular radio, and there's a small
There's
satellite in orbit around Gethin
orbit,
that
yes.
can wake up like a dozen people on an actual interstellar spaceship that is just orbiting the sun.
and they're just
and-
in cryo.
Yeah, and if he doesn't call them in like 2 or 3 years, they're just gonna wake up anyway and send another guy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, those were all like really
Interesting.
interesting, and it just made the Ecumen feel like very, I don't know, maybe it just sounds obvious, but it's like logical, methodical, prepared, all the things that you would need to be if you're like, fucking cultivating and colonizing, galaxies and shit. Like, obviously, they have a method.
Yeah. I wouldn't say colonizing.
No, you're right, but it's like I feel like that Genly's explanation and the relative thoroughness of his answers and all that really like drove home that there's 83 other worlds in Ecumen. This is so far away from their first rodeo, and so like you get that clash of all the characters on Gethin, of course. This is the first time they don't know. They're learning all this for the first time, and Genly is kind of like, yeah, like this is how it works. Like they have all these questions. I guess what I'm trying to say is like the questions that the Githenians are asking are probably a lot of the same questions that you, the reader, might be considering. And I feel like Le Guin has generally respond very intelligently and very confidently in a way that like
the author.
Well, yes, certainly. It at once like answers enough questions where you as the reader are like, I'm like understanding this world a little bit more. And I just feel like it fills in enough of the blanks where it's kind of, we were discussing this last episode of how, especially in a science fiction story, I guess sci-fi and fantasy, like sometimes it's the little touches that sort of like expand into these greater things in your imagination. And I felt like that Genly's responses, although brief, like immediately, just like filled in like miles of gaps where it was like, he just says like one sentence and then you're just like, completely. Yeah. You're doing half the legwork all of a sudden. And you're like, oh, yeah, right. They're in cryostasis. Like, you're just filling in all this, like, sci-fi minutia or jargon. And you're just like, oh, yeah, no, completely. Yeah. Like, this feels like a galaxy-spanning collection of worlds. And Genly is the ambassador. I don't know. As I explain it feels obvious. But I'm just trying to say, like, I think Le Guin like writes it very convincingly, and we went from having like a lot of questions to like way fewer. I feel like in just the span of a few pages, where it was like, wow, thank you, like I get it now, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a massive clarification. For us, we know it's not as much of a revelation to us as it is to people that he is dining with. But fleshes out a lot of things. What did we think of all of their reactions to this news? Because he's in a group of some interesting people.
I thought the Githenians were, I don't know, it was a mix, but I could definitely see a lot of the greedy responses and the self-serving ones.
Yeah.
I mean, they're pretty obvious with their like, oh, we can make this will be how we get over Karhai. It's like they're still thinking way too small. And at the same time, I found it interesting that Genly isn't surprised by this, isn't like worried about this. He's just like, they haven't learned yet.
Yeah,
and
he's pretty much like, they'll get over it.
Yeah, it's a very I don't know, not condescending, but like almost wise, but also it's like
it is.
Yeah, right. He knows.
Right, but you'd also expect like these people are agreeing for such a rude awakening that could absolutely shatter their entire culture and sense of being. Not just as people, but as nations, as a culture, as a people, could be shattered by First Contact. That's one of the reasons why First Contact is supposed to be so delicately handled in other situations, like in Star Trek, where it's just like it's often cited as like the biggest question in the real world is like, are we alone in the universe? And here these people are facing the answer and are being invited to a seat at the table when they can't even amongst dozens of worlds, and they can't even figure out if what a like a couple square miles of land actually belongs to.
Sounds familiar.
It's if the news of what Genly is offering gets out to the general public in Orgerin, I think things will start to snowball a little bit. No pun intended. It's like the Githenians really are like aware of him and know he's some anomaly, and maybe some of them believe that he's from a different world. But the leaders of Ordrin are some of the first ones to recognize what his offer means for them, but their vision is still too small. And that is dangerous from my understanding of these kind of things from other works of fiction. These people are seeing a warp core and imagining a bomb. So,
yes. You know, what I liked reading through the chapter is that Genly kind of recognizes that, and he's like, well, you know, I get that they probably think that this is just to their benefit, but you know, essentially he's kind of like, who cares? You know, it's like, however they get there, they get there. And once they open up the door, the rest will figure itself out.
Pandora's box.
You know, I don't think Genly is as like casual or flippant about it, like, but you know, they've done this 83 other times. And, you know, not Genly personally, of course, but like we keep talking about all the information he has access to, everything he's read. This probably falls very much in line with like, oh, this is the process. If they want to open up for selfish means, then let them, and the opening itself will affect and change them for the better or destroy them. I mean, they haven't mentioned that, but he doesn't seem worried about it.
Yeah, that's the thing.
I will counter. Sorry, I will counter really quick.
Go ahead.
They've done it successfully 83 times. There's been no mention of failure. That doesn't mean there hasn't been failure. It just means they haven't mentioned failure.
That's exactly what I was gonna bring up. I mean, it doesn't seem like there's any implied failure on the part of the Ecumen, but it does make you wonder. Were there failed attempts?
I mean, the Ecumen is
or do they
business,
just
it's
keep
an
on
economic
trying,
sorry,
and they
go
push
ahead.
gently. They just push gently. No pun intended. Gently, not really a pun. Just kind of sounds similar.
Yeah, I get it.
But or yeah, they just push so gently that they don't actually that even if they fail, it's just a matter of scaling back and trying again later. I think maybe that's their approach. Maybe it hasn't backfired at all, but it does make you think. Well, what if it has ended in terror?
Yes. Yeah, I agree. And I hadn't thought about that until the two of you were mentioned, because, you know, of course, Le Guin kind of covers, oh, this is all the bad shit that can happen to the ambassador. You'll be boiled alive and eaten and all. It's like, you know, that's pretty plain. You will get fucked up if you go to an alien planet and say you're an alien. But yes, like, what are the consequences of a society opening themselves up to like the galactic scale? Does that backfire? Even though we don't have an answer to that, or even like implication, I do kind of feel like this whole age of the enemy thing maybe alludes to that a little bit, because we get this understanding that effectively all the worlds of the Ecumen and maybe even beyond are sort of like rebuilding themselves over, I don't know, thousands of years of like post like galactic obliteration.
Is the enemy part of the Hainish cycle? Is like that's what started the 93rd cycle or whatever we're on now? Who is the enemy? Are they other humans? Is it the sea people again?
Do you know your enemy?
Raham.
There were a few different crossed wires there.
Yes. I brought up history, Connor brought up Green Day, and then Connor brought up Ham?
Oh no, that's the joke within the Green Day community is that Billy Joe says Raham. Do you know the enemy, Raham? That's cool.
They were both Green Day references.
He doesn't really say Raham, but it kind of sounds like it if you are not listening.
Okay. I just froze up because I didn't want to repeat it, because I just remember the repeat of "Do you know your enemy?"
And one of us could have definitely went for the Danger Days MCR reference there too. So
Oh,
blank on that one.
Destroya.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking
Yeah,
of. Yeah.
that would have been good.
I don't listen to that one as much. Mostly Nana and
Against the sun or the enemy. Or
Yeah.
Titus Andronicus, which Connor I just saw. They have a song that goes,
listen to
"The
Kids a lot.
enemy is everywhere. The enemy is everywhere."
Oh yeah, they played that
yeah,
one.
They did. Yeah, that's a good one.
They played that one. Man, it's almost like that word gets it's important or something.
Yeah, it seems to be.
Yeah, I mean, at any rate, whether the enemy is self imposed or created or not, it really did open up a lot of doors to like what is the state of the it's essentially because what I liked about it is it felt like it flipped the ecumen on its head, where like mostly we get an understanding of the ecumen through the conceit of the plot, obviously, which is like, hey, here's this alliance of worlds and the ambassadors trying to bring a new one into the fold. It feels like they're pretty well established. Like, this isn't the first time they're doing this. 83 worlds sounds like a lot, if you ask me.
Mm-hmm.
And yet suddenly with just this like sentence, it immediately inverts it, and it's like they're clawing their way out of the ashes. 83 worlds might be nothing. Before the Age of the Enemy, I mean, we're speculating here, but they could have had hundreds, thousands of worlds. Whatever it was, it seems to be clear to me that the implication is that whatever the ecumen is now, it is essentially an attempt to recreate what was there before the enemy. This is a rebuilding. And so it's strange to kind of reframe it in that way, because to the Gethenians, which is like largely our understanding of the ecumen, of course, it's going to seem like this impossibly vast. I mean, like Josh was saying, it's like first contact. It's like beyond vast. It's consciousness expanding. It's a confirmation of like the unknown question within every living life form, whether they know it or not. And yet to Genly, it's like, oh fuck. We should be doing a lot better. You know what I mean? Like, and that's just like a I don't know, really like a cosmically sort of fucky kind of idea of like this contrast of I don't know, potentials and shit. Man. Genly says, Connor, you are not going to find this page as readily, but on page 146, unless you want to mention something.
Can you guys still see me?
I can. Yeah. I can see you.
All right.
It looks like you're kind of fucked up.
All right, I can't see. Okay, now I can see you guys again.
Okay. So on page on.
I thought that was. I wasn't sure if you guys could see me either. I thought maybe.
Yeah. No. It's just you fucking up. On page 146, I wanted to. There's a couple lines in particular that Genly says I wanted to mention. This is like the first one that I was like, okay. Genly says, but the ecumen is not essentially a government at all. It is an attempt to reunify the mystical with the political, and as such is, of course, mostly a failure, but its failure has done more good for humanity so far than the successes of its predecessors. Which is a little bit of what we were just talking about, but
yeah,
what line,
I was just gonna bring that up actually about the failure.
Let's do it.
Well, I think it's just
146, Josh.
Thank you.
What page is it for me, Connor?
I don't know. I don't see. Connor, you're just like, oh, who cares? Who cares? Yeah, whatever. Whatever.
I just think the failure the way that way of looking at it, I feel like is just like a healthy way of looking at a project that is so big and so vast, that it's like it's a project of failure. But even though it is moving the needle slowly but steadily, it's still doing good work, or it's still worthwhile, you know. Whereas like an organization like from Dune, the Bene Gesserit, like I mean, even though they look at their project in terms of eons as well, you know. But to them, failure it's a bit more harsh and a bit more do or die. You know, fit like you know, for the Ecumen, it is just like, well, failure is part of the process. And while that remains true to the Bene Gesserit, it's certainly not looked on as neutrally, I guess.
Yeah, I do get what you mean, like the difference there. Because yeah, Dune very much like I feel like with Dune it's much more by necessity. Like I feel like with Dune, it's like success or failure, whatever the
Yeah.
outcome. The passage of time necessitates like a sequential response, and
Yeah.
so whether you succeeded or failed, or is always kind of like, well, you know, given the passage of enough time, some sort of response or event will occur because of it, and then there's like new opportunity for regrowth or whatever it is. But yeah, I mean, here I don't know. I like the idea. It's I don't know, but I kind of felt like uh I think in essence, I completely agree with it, and I like that Genly is like upfront about the flaws of like their own way of organizing, which is like very different from like a monarchy or you know like in Karhide. If you're gonna make any like affront to the king, you know you're gonna be exiled. Like you don't have that right, and yet Genly's so used to that that like even as an ambassador to this new world, he's like, yeah, I mean it's not all perfect, right? I mean like we're all just like failing together, but I don't know. I guess that idea can be applied to a lot of things. Like it even sort of makes me think of capitalism, where it's like,
Mm.
you know, sure, like as a system in its entirety, like oh, it's absolute failure, 100%. We're constantly failing, and yet, hey, look at the progress that we've made through our failure. Look at
I
what we're
think
able to accomplish because of how we fail.
I think that's the difference between the Bene Gesserit project and the Ecumen project. Whereas the Bene Gesserit failure costs lives, and they kind of are, you know, use a very sharp set of tools, you know. Um, and yeah, it uses a sharp set of tools. We'll be right back.
Just tap on your microphone.
Oh,
That's all I was saying. I'm sorry.
Do you not hear me?
No, I can hear you. It's just
okay.
I was trying to
You
help
sound
you.
underwater.
I thought you were doing the pause for time thing. Okay,
My bad.
We gotta figure out signals. All right.
Okay, hand signals. Got it.
All right, and we're back. So yeah, you
Like
know,
we
as far
left.
as Bene Gesserit being the stand-in for capitalism, like the capitalist system, it uses that same tool set where it's hard and loose with the people and things it cuts and hurts and chops down and destroys. Whereas the Ecumen, while I mean, I think inevitably there are casualties in this process, of course, you know, but it's you know, I think it's more of a humanist project or a humanitarian project that like serves life instead of serves capital, or whatever you know, whoever the Bene Gesserit are serving. I guess the Bene Gesserit. Um, So yeah, I think those are the two differences in the modes of uh, of progress.
Yeah, yeah. Um, man, that's one. I'm like, I don't want to touch that because I feel like that's like too big of a discussion. There's even
Yeah,
other things I want to talk about in this chat, but like that's.
I know that could be a few episodes.
But yeah, no, that's. I do. I guess what I'll say is like I do think you're right that the Ecumen is more of like a humanitarian effort where I really do think Genly is like we are literally here in order to like uplift the collective humanity that is isolated throughout the galaxy or even like beyond, you know, where it's like because it seems like the idea is effectively that they're like there are no aliens. It seems like the more we learn, it's like, yeah, you know, Genly is culturally an alien, but the people of Gethin and the people of Earth all have a common ancestor. It's like, yeah, maybe they're weird bio experiment freaks, but like they're all humans. And I do think that like the idealistic kind of message of the Ecumen is we are attempting to unite humanity, whether, you know, especially considering that humanity is not aware of itself. And yet there is also kind of this follow through where as Genly is pitching it, he's like, well, yeah, you know, but I'm also here to like open up trade and commerce, and it's not just of goods, it's trade of ideas and this and that. But I do kind of feel like there's like this sort of like underhanded follow through, and I'm not trying to say that Genly is sinister about it, but he just does kind of have this like, oh, and one more thing, like really the big thing is not that you're going to be opened up to a galactic society where everyone gets on a spaceship and we hang out together. It's kind of basically like we all just like trade with each other. You know, like, and it's probably more beneficial for us, the Ecumen, than it might be for you personally, the planet of Gethin. Like, but
or you
just
personally, the members of the come on, the commensals. Fuck, what are they called?
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Commensals. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, because Genly's like, oh, well, they think they're going to accrue this. They want to take the deal because they think they're going to accrue this power. But like Genly is kind of reflecting or considering, and he's like, well, to be open to the Gethin is sort of a to be open to the Ecumen is like a relinquishing of power.
Exactly, yes. And I mean, I think there is an underhandedness there. You're absolutely right that he's not letting on, well, down this path means we, you know, essentially Orgrin, the Ordrin, and all of its power structures and all this bureaucracy, that will all be absolved. That's not going to exist for much longer after you open yourselves up to us. So absolutely. And I think that's kind of why he is dealing with you know, kid gloves here. He is like, oh, it's like so sweet and kind of a quaint idea that they think that they can leverage me and leverage this deal to take power over Gethin. That's actually not at all what's going to happen in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah. Well, this has been a much more expansive conversation than I actually thought it was going to be when we But that kind of is the deal, right? It's like
yeah. Absolutely, yeah. No, I mean, and I hadn't thought of it that way, but he's definitely not laying all of his cards out just out in the open. I mean, he even says that, like you know, he even says, well, I'm revealing more to you guys than I did to Carhide because you guys are ready for it. You guys are more mature. You're treating me with more respect, but obviously, and you know, they're oblivious to it, but there's obviously a level that he's not revealing to them either.
Yeah, and you know what is especially interesting about that is we were talking earlier in this conversation how Genly is completely befuddled and even frustrated with Estraven. He's like, what is this dude's deal?
Yeah.
But Genly and Estraven are doing the same thing to each other.
Exactly right. Yeah.
And Genly, I think, is like making this assumption that because he's coming here as an alien from a hyper advanced civilization, you know, he's basically just chilling out with ants for a few years on some level. And he's like, who is this Estraven, you know, who is conversing with me as if they're equals or beyonds? Like, who are you to weaponize this strategy of like concealment of your information, whereas like that's precisely my mode of operating with you. I'm the fucking one who's coming from an alliance of 83 goddamn worlds. You live in a fucking mud hut on a fucking snow ass planet. Who the fuck are you to be withholding information from me?
Mm.
But Genly, I don't even think is like conscious of it. I don't even think he's taken the step to consider that Estraven and Genly are playing the same game. I think Estraven's more aware of it than Genly.
I think you're probably right. I think there is an element of arrogance, I guess, that Genly has, especially when it comes to Estraven. But just as as far as being so far, or feeling that he's so far above everything on the planet.
Okay. Well, we are going to be wrapping up very shortly. There are two small things I legally have to mention. I'm legally obligated. I have to mention them.
Go for it.
One is that Guin uses the word Sith in 1969.
Wait,
she does. I did notice that. Josh didn't pick up on that. Wow.
No.
Wow.
Oh, Josh, on page 148 in your copy, if you look down at the final paragraph on that page, it reads, "Here and now." It means
if Sith, the island nations or the island. Okay, yeah. So I was reading that. You're right. I was reading that as a just part of the book. It's just part of the world. It's a location or a country or whatever it was. Because it was that context of country or location, it was not connecting to the Sith Order from Star Wars. But yeah, no, that is a interesting coincidence. What the heck?
Well, I don't know. I kind of wonder if it's a coincidence because we know that George Lucas read Dune. And
okay, this isn't Dune.
Well, yes. But stay with me here, Josh, because, I'm not saying that George Lucas got Sith from the left hand of darkness. He very well may not have. But as Dune has exploded in popularity, and even beforehand, like I had heard the similarities between Star Wars and Dune for a long-ass time, well before I got into Dune, just by nature of being a Star Wars fan. And so by the time I got around to reading Dune, it was like, oh, I get it. Well, so really all I'm positing here is George Lucas read sci-fi. George Lucas was a fucking sci-fi nerd, no surprise. So if he read Dune, I mean,
yeah,
maybe he read Left Hand of Darkness. I don't know, I mean, this book came out in fucking 8 years before Star Wars was released.
Yeah.
True.
It's true. It's not beyond the pale.
The Sith were also not really mentioned until
what was it, Empire? It's not in A New Hope, I know.
No, I was about to say episode 1 in 99, but no, I can't even remember if it was in the original trilogy or not.
Yeah. Oh, I'm trying to
remember if Vader was ever referred to as Dark Lord of the Sith or something. Because I remember there being some legend stuff about there actually being a Sith race.
Okay, well, actually, Josh, this is really funny. Because I'm remembering, at least I think so, I think that's part of what makes the Thrawn trilogy so fascinating, because Timothy Zahn, I think, is like the first one to really expand on what Dark Lord of the Sith might mean. And I believe in the first book, maybe it's the second one, but the Sith are like this race of almost like rat-like humanoid aliens, and like Vader, they're like sent out. They're like sent to Kashyyyk to get like Leia and shit.
No, you're thinking the Nogri.
I am.
They're huh? No, the Sith were like an ancient. I remember they're being red-skinned for some reason, but they were basically an ancient warrior race that the Sith Order kind of evolved from in Legends.
Oh.
That were basically died off around Darth Bane's time when he instigated the Rule of Two. There may be some floating around, but they're not actual like dark side Sith. But of course, that's Legends, and yeah. But yeah, the Nogri are what you're thinking of in the Thrawn trilogy, and that's different. They're also,
that is what I'm thinking of, yeah.
They're also ape-like, not rat-like.
Okay, thank you.
So guys, before we move on, I want to say Google AI has helped me out with this actually. And so
yikes.
So Google AI is they're telling me that the word Sith likely originates from the 1914 science fiction novel The Warlord of Mars by Edgar Rice Burroughs, where it refers to a species of beetle.
Ooh.
I will say it's a 4-letter word. There's only so many combinations of pronounceable 4-letter words.
Yes, but you say there's so many, which is true, but there's a lot of
pronounceable.
That's still a lot. I mean, a lot. Like, yeah. a lot. Like, thousands. Like, there's a lot.
Yes, but how many... Okay, it's an order of magnitude here. It's like, yes, there are thousands of pronounceable 4-letter words, but there's been billions of written words, like, in the last century.
I am not accusing George Lucas of plagiarism. I'm just saying, isn't it funny that the word Sith comes up in this book, which Left-Handed Darkness is commonly compared and in conversation with Dune, and it is a known fact that George Lucas himself read and was inspired is a big word. I don't think George Lucas would say that. But like when you look at Star Wars and Dune side by side, it's like, inspired by Dune. And so I just kind of felt like, is there something there? Whatever. It's cool that the word Sith is in the Left-Handed Darkness. Here's the other thing I wanted to mention. Josh, this was I believe this was our discussion of the last episode. It was when Genly meets Fax. That might have been 2 episodes ago. Now I can't even remember, but it doesn't matter.
2 episodes, yeah.
Yeah, 2 episodes. When Genly meets Fax, there's like Fax and then another person. They're meditating across from each other in this forest. Hey, look at that. There's kind of like this separation, a mirror, a dichotomy, whatever. But at any rate, you said that you felt like you read a description that said they cast no shadows, and you were like, oh, well, that's weird. Why would I think that? That's crazy. It doesn't make any sense. Josh, if you open up your book to page 157, there is a line.
Yep. At
the very bottom, Genly says
if it did not cast shadows.
Exactly.
So the reason I brought that up when he was at the monastery, it's not the first time that shadows were brought up in the book. That was the first what do I call it? Like folk tale that the book conveys to us about the guy who killed his brother and then basically went crazy out in the wilderness and met his brother in the afterlife and came back.
Yeah.
That one talks about having shadows and not casting shadows quite a bit. So I think that's why I was primed to think about it a bit. And seeing that come up again at the end of this chapter, chapter 10, makes me wonder that if this metaphor is going to continue to be used and if it may become less of a metaphor as we see more. But the way I've been interpreting that, or the way I interpreted it when it came up this time, is that casting a shadow just means to have a presence. Do whatever that means.
Yeah.
So if you don't cast a shadow, you're just kind of not there, not present, kind of like I've been half this podcast.
No, I think we've all had
casting
periods.
shadows. You're casting shadows.
But
casting shade.
yeah, I do think that there's like this kind of bigger idea where we keep coming back to like I don't know, like kind of like an equal and opposite sort of thing, or like a negative version of something, like Karhide and Orgeron and Estraven and Genly and Estraven Therum from the Fable and Stoke or whatever from the, it's like over and over again there are like these equal and opposite or like mirror images, which effectively is like light and shadow, left and right. And yeah, like I don't know what all these pieces together mean, but it does feel like it kind of continues this idea of like a reflection or something that exists like in relation to and because of something else. And I guess like, wrapping all this up, because Josh, you're saying like if like casting a shadow is to have presence, a big thing that we're kind of left hanging with at the end of this chapter is Genly sort of saying like, man, he's left wondering. He's unsure of the people who surround him.
Yep.
And it kind of feels like he's on the verge of really hearing and understanding Estraven. I feel like Estraven's the only one warning him, who, Estraven is like, you feel accepted and welcomed within the society of Orgeron, but, this place is just as dangerous and shady in its own ways as Karhide. I think Estraven is the only one who's really trying to support and help Genly. And the end of this chapter, Genly's kind of waking up to that fact and considering like, okay, like, yeah, there's the secret police guy, but it's like maybe everyone in Orgeron, there's something about them that there's I don't know.
Yeah,
there's something within them that cannot be trusted, and he's becoming aware of that.
I mean, the last part of the last few words of the chapter, and could not be counted on, I think really sums up exactly what that feeling is. Like, he can't count on anyone in Orgeron. And I think we're just kind of glossing over something really at the end here. It's that this is kind of like part of his mental abilities. It's like somewhere between his telepathy abilities and the hunch that we saw a few chapters ago, where he's just kind of starting to reach out into the force, for lack of a better term to describe this, and get a sense of what's going on around him. It describes it as like as a metaphor, like the ideas come to him in metaphor, and that's how we get like the feeling a vague sense of unease, as if the hot water was not altogether real and reliable.
So, Josh, are you saying that George Lucas also got the idea of the Force from The Left Hand of Darkness?
Probably not, but I could see some strong similarities between the way Genly is using his mental abilities.
I think it's definitely a great ripoff, actually.
I may reconsider that opinion if Genly starts levitating rocks and calling foray guns to his side.
He might have to like fucking levitate his firecracker ship out of a swamp or something. I don't know how
that would be cool.
Back.
And maybe there's like a little green guy in the swamp or something.
Yes.
No, guys, it's Gethin. He's gonna be ambushed by a giant bear creature and like hung up by his ankles. and has to call a knife to himself so he can like chip away at the ice so he can run away. Then he'll go to a swamp planet and go see a little green guy.
That makes sense.
That's a good prediction.
All right, ready to wrap things up, folks?
Yes.
Sounds like you are.
Wow, what a long, crazy conversation it's been.
And it was mostly on topic.
Yeah,
we didn't spend half an hour going off on some nonsense at the beginning. Only about 15 minutes on Connor's new oven woes.
We never do that.
Look at us. Connor, please take us away.
Oh, thank you guys. Thanks for listening, for enjoying the conversation. We appreciate it. Next week, we will cover chapters 11 and 10. If you like what you hear, you can follow us on social media. We are on Twitter and Blue Sky at Chapter Chumps. Two very different posting styles, but they both exist nonetheless. You can email us at chapterchumpspod@gmail.com for any, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns. Please head over to Apple Podcasts, give us a nice review as well as a 5-star rating. And as always, and most importantly, folks, until next time.
Whoa, we're halfway there.
Whoa, acumen something.
Brilliant. Well, we're on that for next week, and then that'll be our new theme song.
Cool.
Fuck.
All right, and this is the extra 10 seconds of the show that the live stream gets. So, farewell to you, live streamers.
Fuck my dance.
All right.